Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Interesting Word Balloon today because we're taking a look back, more than 10 years ago, to the Robert Kirkman Manifesto. You might remember back in 2008, right at San Diego Comic-Con, Kirkman said he was leaving Marvel Comics to focus more on his creator-owned works. And in fact, kind of did a call to arms to all creators, saying, hey, save your original ideas for yourself. You should all follow me in this path. And even went a little further in suggesting that DC and Marvel should really focus on the teen market and let the adult fare be taken care of by Image and publishers like Dark Horse. Everything didn't happen the way that Kirkman had, I wouldn't say predicted, but wanted it to go. But I think it's interesting to go back, listen to Robert's reasons why he was making the move that he was at the time. I count myself as one of the, I wouldn't say that I was against what Robert was proposing, but I also felt that not every creator could afford that luxury of, sidestepping the big two and immediately going into creator-owned work. Well, times change, and I think in the last 10 plus years, we've seen that there are a lot of creators that while they were invited to join DC and Marvel have said no and stuck to creator-owned works. And I think with platforms like Kickstarter and GoFundMe and just putting out a webcomic itself, these creators have found independent success, don't have to cater to just taking a cut of the pie and having the publisher have the lion's share of whatever it is they're creating. And it's interesting to see where we've come from. We all know where we are now, but how do we get there? And I'm not saying Robert was the first, because certainly there are a lot of creator-owned comics that were going on. Obviously, you going back to Cerebus, Dave Sim, things like that. Much more examples. ElfQuest, another good example about that. The late, great Bat and Lash doing Supernatural Law. There are always quirky little books that kind of fell under the trends. Ms. Tree from, Max Allan Collins and Terry Beatty. There were tons of various examples of other creator-owned comics. But, there was the first wave of Image back in the 90s. And then the second wave of Image, where I think people like Bendis had things like Powers, and Greg Rucka had Queen and Country and things like that. But then all of a sudden, with Walking Dead, I think really things changed greatly. And I think this is a good way to look back and see where Robert was and why he was doing the things that he was doing. I also have Bendis' rebuttal to Kirkman's Manifesto. And that'll be in part 2 of this Word Balloon. But I think, like I said, I wanted to kind of go back and look at this and give everybody a reminder of some of the things we were dealing with as far as the state of comics, where things went, and where things are going. So I wanted to look back more than 10 years ago to the Kirkman Manifesto, and that's the point of today's Word Balloon. Thanks for listening. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. No other advertisers other than whatever Spreaker puts on at the very beginning of the show and at the end of the show, because it's a rerun, and I just wanted to look back. I don't know where my mind was, where I was thinking, let's post this. But I thought you guys would get a kick out of it, and women, and I hope you do. Sometimes I really feel fortunate, having done Word Balloon for 14 years, that I've got this kind of evergreen conversation in the Word Balloon library, and people can look back at moments and what people were thinking at the moment. So it's fun to see what was on Kirkman's mind and Bendis' mind. I'm sure there have been subtle changes to these opinions, and it's something we should explore in future conversations with Kirkman and Bendis, hopefully in the years ahead or in the months ahead. But let's go back and see what it was like back in 2008 when the Kirkman Manifesto was fresh. I will take you back to my original introduction to the conversation and also into Bendis' talk as well. So, as always, thanks for supporting Word Balloon via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. But without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Robert Kirkman, including the manifesto itself. So here's my introduction back in 2008 on Word Balloon. Yesterday, Kirkman released a video explaining his departure from Marvel Comics to become a partner at Image to focus on his creator-owned projects. But beyond that, the video was a call to arms for today's writers and artists to create original material, and for the two big publishers, DC and Marvel, to focus more on the teen reading market and let imprints like Image and Dark Horse cater to the adult market. Before our conversation begins, if you haven't seen or heard Kirkman's statement, here's the audio from it. It runs 12 minutes and 30 seconds, so if you want to fast forward directly to our talk, there's the time, starting now.
Hi, Robert Kirkman here. Just got back from Comic-Con. It was announced before Comic-Con that I have left Marvel Comics to come to Image Comics. They've made me a partner, and I'm going to be focusing on creator-owned work exclusively. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about that. The question that I was asked the most is, why did I do it? Why did I leave Marvel Comics to do creator-owned work exclusively? And aside from 1,000 other reasons, the main reason, the reason I want to talk about now, is I did it to save the entire comic book industry. And I know that sounds a little arrogant, a little goofball, and that's fine. But this is very serious, and I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. Right now the comic book industry is backwards. No one watches a movie and decides that they want to do movies and aspires to only ever do Pulp Fiction 2. And no one reads a novel and decides they want to do novels and only ever aspires to do Moby Dick 2. And in the industry, the way it works right now is a lot of times guys come into creator-owned comics, like me, like Bendis, like Jonathan Hickman, like Matt Fraction, and 1,000 other artists, but I'm a writer, and so I'm using writer references. We come into the comic book industry doing creator-owned work, and we eventually graduate up to Marvel, and then that's the end of the story. And you work your way up to the Marvel pecking order, and sometimes you get to the top, and sometimes you get to the middle, and sometimes you languish at the bottom, but, you make a good living, and it's excellent work. It's fun to do, and, at the end of the day, I had a great time at Marvel. Joe Quesada, super brilliant man. They do things that you guys don't even know about. They think 12 steps ahead. I was in awe to witness the inner workings of Marvel Comics, and they produce some really, really good books. But at the end of the day, when you're hot, you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. And when you're not hot, they don't want you, and your career is over, and that's bad for creators. And the thing you need to do is eventually go off into creator-owned stuff. It's been proven that, when you do creator-owned work, your life in the industry is a little longer, as long as it's good. And there are examples of people making money doing comics, like Mignola, Frank Miller, and all the Image guys. And me, I've been doing the industry a bit of a disservice. The general thought has usually been that I do Marvel work to supplement my Image work, and that's true to a certain extent, but not in a financial way. Marvel has always accounted for a very small part of my income, and my books, Walking Dead cracks into the top 100 every now and then, but they sell very little, but they make a lot of money because they're not paying for a corporation. And so I've got artists that are making a living just doing my books, and I make a swell living on trade paperbacks and single issues and everything that I do. And so I'm here to say that it can be done and that it should be done. The way that the comic industry should work is that you start out in low-selling creator-owned stuff that you do on your own, or low-selling books that you eventually graduate up to Marvel from doing, or DC. And you work your way up through that. And when you hit a certain level where you can sell a book on your own, you leave. And that's the way it should be. Everyone would be happier doing their own work, I think. Maybe not. But the problem is, and this is where it gets into saving the industry, I read a ton of Marvel and DC books, and I love them because they are fantastic, and I am the target audience. I'm going to be 30 years old this year, and I'm just going to get older and older and older. The books are tailor-made for me. They're the characters that I grew up loving, but they're doing things that are more mature and stories that are more complex, and they're all excellent, excellent comics. But the fanboy becomes the fan man, becomes the old man, becomes the dead man. And we are all going to take the comic book industry with us. There are not enough new people coming in the industry as it is, learning, comics and loving comics. And we're doing great right now. The movies are great. Sales are up. Trade paperbacks are killing. Bookstores, graphic novels are the only growth department, and it's just, it's a good time for comics, and people aren't really talking about the state that we're in as much as they used to. And it's not time to rest on our laurels. It's not time to go, well, we're on an upswing. That's great. There's more that can be done, and I'm getting to that. If all those people that are getting the kind of freedom at Marvel and DC to do whatever they want and make the stories as complex and entertaining as they are, we're doing that on creator-owned books. The audience that we have now would be able to read those books and enjoy those books, but they would be on original characters. And that opens up a whole new door to cinema and, adapting movies to, it's a whole new revenue stream for creators. And so it is more lucrative than working at Marvel and DC, unless you're the top two people at both companies. And there's only 4 of those guys. But I know that people are watching this, and Marvel and DC are saying, "Well, what the hell is wrong with this guy? This is the worst thing in the world. He should not be telling these people to leave Marvel and DC." But I'm telling you right now, in the long run, it would help Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC lock people down to contracts because they know that people sell books and people do good work on the books. And while they're locked under contract, there's negotiations every time a contract comes up to keep them. And these creators sometimes rise up the ranks in the company, getting a raise every time their contract is up. Or they bounce back and forth and play the companies off each other and make more and more and more money to work on the corporate characters. And that's fine, but you're eventually going to bid yourself out of existence. Maybe you guys are paying your creators too much. Maybe you're treating them too well. And if you were hiring young guys and having young guys do awesome work, because, when you start out at Marvel and DC, I think that's when you do some of your best work, in most cases. And if Marvel and DC had more control over the stories, because they were younger guys that didn't have to be given so much freedom or else they would leave, they could make the stories tailor-made for younger audiences. Because our audience, the 30-year-olds, are reading all the top guys' creator-owned stuff because we follow the creators. But younger kids don't care about the creators. I know that there was a time when I was young and reading comics that I didn't even know what that credit box was. And as long as you're producing good stories, you will appeal to kids. And appealing to kids is what Marvel and DC should be doing. Dark Horse and Image should be appealing to the fan men. And I hate that term, but if you're 20 to 40 to 50 to 60 and you're still reading comics, and there's nothing wrong with that. I still read comics. Comics are better than television and movies, and the more people that knew that, the better off they'd be. But, we can't put a lockdown on Marvel and DC characters because those characters belong to the world. And those characters help children learn to read and help children enjoy reading. And, I know that there are adventures lines and stuff like that, but those talk down to kids to a certain extent, and that's not what kids want. Kids want to feel like they're reading something that's, not necessarily meant for them, but appropriate for them. And that's what we need to do, and that saves the comic book industry. And that makes Marvel and DC's work easier because they're appealing to a larger audience. They're not having to give these ridiculous contracts to these high-paid writers and artists. And the writers and artists are happier because they're doing what they want. And creator-owned work is hard. Don't get me wrong. And not everyone can do creator-owned work. And so, this isn't, there's going to be some spillover, and there's going to be some guys that just want to write and draw Spider-Man and Batman. But the more people that do creator-owned work, the easier it'll be to sell creator-owned work. I'm one guy. I'm out there. I'm doing it. I'm making a living. I'm making a good living. And if there were 2 of me, we'd be selling better. And if there were 6 of me, we'd be selling huge. And if there were 20 of me, fans would come. And it can happen. And, creator-owned books would be selling better. And Marvel and DC books would be selling better. And Marvel and DC would still be number 1 and 2. And everyone would be happier. And I think that this is a discussion. This isn't the final say, and I'm sure that I've said things that are completely wrong, but I think that, everyone should consider thinking about this and talking about this, and we shouldn't be so afraid to have an open discussion about such things. I propose a conference. The heads of the companies should get together on a cruise, who knows, whatever, and talk about this kind of stuff. There's no way that through cooperation and communication we can't do huge things that we never thought we could do. And we can still compete, and competition is excellent, and we should still compete, but there is no reason that we can't work together to make comic books what they once were, what they can be, and what they were meant to be. I love comics. I love everything about them. I love everyone who reads them, and I love everyone who does them. And it's a special part of my life. And I just want to make sure that my great-great-grandchildren can still read the same medium that I grew up loving. And I don't care if they're reading it on a television screen in their wrist, as long as they're still reading it. Comics will survive. And I think that we'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. And so I hope that this didn't infuriate too many people. I hope that you see the intent. I think that's enough for me. I'll sign off. But, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, so that's the full statement from Robert Kirkman, and I appreciate him allowing me to play this at the beginning to frame our discussion, which begins now. Well, first, you tell me the progression of events. Did this thought to make this video come to you after you were made a partner, or can you give me the series of events that kind of led to where we're at right now with you as far as this statement?
Well, the first thing I should probably say is that I don't necessarily... this statement isn't a statement of Image Comics. This is a statement of Robert Kirkman, who is a partner at Image Comics, but, and part of it is, I'm a partner, obviously, and I want people to come and do stuff at Image Comics, but, if people are happier other places, like that's part of the mission statement. People do what they're happiest doing, but... I got the idea, I guess, when I was at San Diego. I was going to do it as a text piece, and I had so much stuff coming out of San Diego that I had to do. I didn't have time, and so I was like, I am never going to sit down and write this essay. I might as well just videotape it and see how that turns out, and so that's what I did.
What was the reaction from your Image partners when they saw the video?
So far, I've only heard from a few people. Larson's fine with it, and Todd saw it and made a couple funny comments that I'm not going to repeat because they are slightly demeaning. But just about my appearance. Todd likes to, I have a gigantic head, and so like when I was a child, I would play t-ball. and I was the only kid playing t-ball that had to run to the Little League field to borrow a helmet every time he had to bat because they didn't have helmets big enough for me on the Little League team. That is not even an exaggeration. That actually happened word for word. Like every time I would have to bat, I would go and get one, and then they'd let me keep it for a little bit, and and then after the game, I'd have to bring it back. So yeah, screw Todd. But nobody talked me off the ledge, so it went up.
Okay.
I mean, I did. I am a partner at Image Comics, and I'm not going to say that 50 times during this interview. I already repeated it twice, and that's it. I'm done.
Okay.
But I got to let those guys know. I mean, because I am
Sure.
part of the company, and so I did give them a heads up before it went live. And yeah.
One of the things that you lay out is your concern of people going into the business for the wrong reason, as far as going in and remaking, existing stories and just bringing their take on an existing story. How is this different? Now, you give the examples of novels and film, but how is this different from? It's funny. I was watching Sidney Pollack on Turner Classic Movies, and they mentioned that he began directing television before getting into features. And I think that's kind of the closest comparison I can think of from a mainstream standpoint. What would you say to that comparison?
I don't want anybody to misunderstand. I'm not saying nobody should ever aspire to write Marvel, and DC characters. Nobody should. Yeah, everyone. I like. If you want to write Spider-Man, write Spider-Man. I really, really, really wanted to write Spider-Man for a really long time, and I still do. I still love Spider-Man. I would love to write it. I'm just saying, that shouldn't be the pinnacle of a comic book career.
Okay,
is what I'm saying. Everyone starts out, Spielberg started out directing television episodes.
Absolutely.
If all he ever directed were television episodes, where would the world be?
Absolutely.
And novelists start out doing short stories in magazines. There's always a starting point.
Sure.
And that's why I'm hoping that, Marvel and DC don't go, they don't get too pissed off at me, because I'm trying to make the statement as clear as possible. And, I mean, if they get pissed off, they get pissed off. It's not a big deal. I'm prepared for that, or I wouldn't have done it. But, think about what I'm saying. I think people should do Marvel and DC books. I just don't think that they should die doing Marvel and DC books. And to be honest, everyone that only ever does Marvel and DC books eventually get ushered out of this industry. I didn't get to say it in the video because that wasn't scripted. That was just me talking. There's no retirement plan in comics.
Clearly.
You write your Marvel and DC books, and you are hot until you are not, and then you're like, oh, thanks for your time, bye. And if you're not saving money the whole time you're doing that, you're kind of screwed, because then you get to a point where you can't sell any comic because you've kind of ridden your career down, and you can't go off and do creator-owned books because, you've kind of allowed yourself to not be, you allowed your popularity to die down. And, I mean, it's a tough damn business. And if you do creator-owned comics, that is your retirement plan. If you do good creator-owned comics and they're fairly successful, do you think Mike Mignola is not going to be making money off of Hellboy when he's 65 years old? That's something to think about.
It's still a lottery, though, Robert. I mean, you're one of the fortunate few. I mean, it's no different from any other creative field where 90% of it is crap and 10% of it is great stuff. And I just can't help but think of so many other people that have tried to do creator-owned books and just haven't connected the way the Mignolas, the Frank Millers, and now yourself. I mean, and there's a longer list than that, but let's just leave those. But you know what I'm saying. So by all means,
it's a lottery to a certain extent, but you have to include Jim Valentino, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Dale Keown. I mean,
yes.
Eric Larson, Mark Silvestri. You have to include those guys, and when you start including everyone, like Jeff Smith, Dave Sim, and I understand that it is still a lottery. Yeah, exactly. And not everyone has creator-owned properties that are commercial, and not everyone has creator-owned properties that they necessarily want to do. Some guys only ever aspire to do that kind of stuff, and that is totally fine.
That's true.
But I just don't want to see people who get to a level where they can do creator-owned stuff and they can sell creator-owned stuff, worry that they can't do it. Okay?
Okay.
And the other thing that I want to say is that, Invincible, only sells 15,000 copies.
Okay.
But it actually does make pretty good money. And The Walking Dead only sells 25,000 copies. And because there's not this, huge corporation that it's paying for, along with everything else, that makes a pretty good chunk of change. And so it's not a matter of you have to sell 60,000, 80,000, 70,000. If you write and draw a book that you just sell 20,000 on, you make a damn good living.
Well, that's good, and I think you're right, and I think there are comparisons to be made as far as novelists as well. But the more important part that you're making, too, is that there isn't the overhead of the corporation to be concerned about.
Yeah, and another thing, and I hate to interrupt you, not everyone can do it, but to a certain extent, a lot of people have tried, and one of the key things that people don't do is they don't stop doing corporate work when they give it a shot. You can't put your feet on both sides of the fence. You have to take that plunge. And the reason you do is because if I'm doing Invincible and I'm writing Spider-Man and I'm giving fans a choice to try my untested property that they don't know that could be awesome, or to try my Spider-Man book that's a property that they know, they're going to choose the Spider-Man book every single time. And so you cannot make a comparison, to a certain extent, to people who are putting their feet on both sides of the fence. It's the people that take the plunge. The early Image guys, Frank Miller, Mike Mignola, those guys that dive into it, that build their name up to a certain extent so there's not that much of a risk, because you have to get to a certain point. You have to get to the point where your Marvel and DC books seem to be selling because of you. If you come onto a book and it goes up, you have to watch for that kind of stuff, because there are people that are at Marvel and DC that are friends with people, that are friends with editors, that do fantastic work, but, they're just kind of mid-level guys, and maybe it's not them moving the needle as much as it's the character. You just have to know that you can do creator-owned stuff. And there's a list, a huge list of guys working in comics now that I know could come and do creator-owned stuff and make a ton of cash. And, and be happier. It's not just about the money, it's creative fulfillment. And it's knowing that, you're blazing your own trail, and you're contributing to the industry in the same way that Stan and Jack and Steve Ditko and everyone, they created that stuff. It's all about creating.
I agree. I also see, though, that there are contemporaries of yours that are straddling both. And I think
they're not doing that well.
No? I mean, I'm asking...
Well, and there's others that are doing well.
Okay.
I mean,
Because it seems like, they're reaping the benefits of, getting their name out there with and again, we'll use mainstream for the purposes of, between comic book fans, mainstream superhero stuff. They get their name out there, and then maybe people reach back and see some of this creator-owned stuff. Certainly Bendis has, I think, found that, audience for his Image stuff. And I think that audience has certainly increased after Ultimate Spider-Man. And sometimes it takes being on an Ultimate Spider-Man to get, your name and face above the din of all these other writers and artists.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been on both sides of the fence since I started at Marvel. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I think if you take the plunge, your books will do better. And the mission statement wasn't necessarily just about guys coming and doing creator-owned books and being happier. Because, like I say, there are guys that enjoy doing Marvel and DC books, and I enjoy doing Marvel and DC books, and if they want to continue doing so, that's their thing. I'm just trying to, shine a light on, extra options. And the other thing about the statement that I made is, changing the game at Marvel and DC and restructuring their entire line to appeal to children more. And that's something that I think is very important. And, if there were a mass exodus, which I'm not calling for a mass exodus, I'm just saying if the changing winds in the comics industry leads to a mass exodus and they have to scramble to think of a new way to do comics, and that results in focusing on a younger audience that they're not necessarily doing right now. They're milking the audience they have. And, they're producing excellent comics that I read and enjoy, but I shouldn't necessarily be the target audience of all Marvel comics, Well, it's not like DC and Marvel are becoming Vertigo. It's not like they're all completely mature, but,
no.
Continuity is a problem. It's hard for kids to jump in, and there are really, dark stuff going on, and there's a lot of things in there that kids, don't necessarily... it's not necessarily for kids. Mm-hmm. And, I love comics. I would read Amazing Spider-Man if it skewed younger. And I think the Brand New Day stuff, to a certain extent, does skew a little younger, and that's fine. You know, like, I would read it either way, because I am like a hardcore comic book fan. I'm not saying like, oh, you know, I shouldn't be reading Marvel and DC books. I need to stop. You know, I'm too old. I'm just saying, like, I would be there anyway. Don't cater to me. We need to be looking to the future a lot more than we are now. And the future, you know, is digital, and Marvel's doing that, and I'm sure DC's got a huge program that they're going to roll out eventually. But aside from digital stuff, we need to work on the content as well. And that's all I'm saying.
Where does distribution fit into these proposals? Because if DC and Marvel did what you're saying, you know, think about it, 95% of the readership that you're looking at, the younger readership, how are they going to know about it? And, you know, they still have to, you know, get into comics, and there's still that competition from all the other outside entertainment as well. So I see what you're saying to a degree about involving younger readers and not just giving them specific. If you give them books specifically geared toward the younger audience, I understand what you're saying about them feeling closed off and that they're not really part of the big game like we were when we were little kids. Yeah. You know, nobody was writing down or drawing down to us. We were just looking at the general product, which was geared at a younger audience.
Yeah.
You know, but who is to say that they should not also benefit from the adult audience as well?
No, sure.
And change their editorial thing with the sole concern of we got to get these young readers, because there is competition out there now for their eyeballs that wasn't there when we were, you know, 13 years old. It's a changing media landscape and what is being directed at kids outside of comics too.
No, well, yeah, I mean, but we were always competing against hopscotch and, you know, T-ball and
well, but
we're
now
competing against video games and everything now.
Yeah, I mean, as opposed to reading about Spider-Man, now you can be Spider-Man, and it's only $50 as opposed to that, you know, $3.99 comic book that you've got to wait till next month to see what happens next, as opposed to fighting to the next level.
Well, I don't have all the answers.
No, I'm just asking that.
But I mean, you know, that's definitely something to discuss, and that is definitely a problem. But I mean, you know, we you know, you tackle one problem at a time, you know, and I do think that the content is a main problem, and I just think that the main core superhero universes should be geared more towards younger readers, and I think that both companies would benefit from that immensely. And if there's a Max line that's not necessarily the Max line, that has more, you know, that's maybe not even necessarily a different universe, like even, you know, back in the day when I was reading comics, you know, Marvel had their graphic novel line, which was in the Marvel universe, but skewed a little more mature. You know, I mean, they've always had that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to necessarily be a different imprint. You know, I just don't think Adventures lines are enough.
Okay.
You know? I don't think that you know, the whatever the Disney thing is called, or the DC.
Johnny DC.
Johnny DC. That's what I'm looking for.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know.
Well, and it depends. It depends on the creator. I think some of them are very approachable stories, and I'll say that for Marvel Adventures as well. And I like some of the Johnny DC product. I see what you're saying, though, and I agree with you.
That's great. I just think that kids see those logos and they go, "That's for kids."
Right.
You know, I want to read Spider-Man. Kids are smart enough to know that the Marvel Adventure Spider-Man isn't really the real Spider-Man. You know? And I'm not saying that to insult those books. I'm sure those books are excellent. I'm just saying, like, kids know that that's a side Spider-Man thing. You know, they're not reading the real Spider-Man. No, and I'm not even necessarily talking about 11-year-olds. You know, we're not really reaching 16 and 17-year-olds at this point. So...
Well, and again, is it a distribution problem?
It's definitely a distribution problem, but I mean, we're in Barnes and Noble and Borders.
True.
You know, and you know, we've got one of the Barnes and Noble test stores here locally in Kentucky, and it has a nice, really wide spinner rack, and they're there. And I mean, you know, distribution's a problem, awareness is a problem. You know, like kids, you know, might not know which comics are which, and those are all things that Marvel and DC are tackling. But you know, I don't see why we can't be looking at the content as well.
And also, where do you, I understand when you're saying, you know, if you create more creator-owned work, people will come. But again, now we also have to look at the stores that are willing, the comic book stores, that are willing to kind of get beyond DC and Marvel. I'm lucky. I'm in Chicago, and we have plenty of great stores that support independent work. and things beyond the mainstream of DC and Marvel.
Yeah.
But I do know of other stores that literally only do Marvel, for example, or do DC and Marvel, but don't do the whole line of DC and Marvel, and aren't interested in Image and Dark Horse and.
Well, that's Image and Dark Horse's job on a publisher level to work on that, and that's something that we're definitely working on. I don't know how Dark Horse is looking at that, but, there are retailers to reach out to. We can expand our retailer base. It's simple enough to do. It's just something that needs to be focused on. I think that Joe Keating, marketing director at Image Comics, is taking great strides in advancing retailer relations.
Okay.
He started to make personal phone calls to retailers. And, just like guys that aren't really ordering a lot of Image books and just, raising awareness. And as we improve our line, which, we are planning on doing, as we're offering, better books, and we're offering awesome books now, but I'm just saying, there are, steps that we're doing, but that's a publisher problem. That's, and that's something that creators definitely need to look at. But, the retailers that are ordering independent comics now are sustainable enough. War Heroes is doing really well. Kick-Ass is doing really well. Criminal is doing really well. I mean, the books are doing okay as it is. And as time goes on, we'll open retailers' eyes to more stuff. So...
Well, I think we're at an interesting point, and I know that's one of the reasons why you've brought up this discussion as far as where the comics industry is and where the mainstream fans, outside of comic book fans, are now really paying attention. I mean, obviously, the attention we're getting from Hollywood and television is higher than it's ever been, and I think it's an interesting time to ask some of these questions. But what do you do when this mainstream has a preconceived notion of when they think of comic books, they are inclined to think of superheroes and DC and Marvel, and it is because of where those two companies are in the market. But I almost wonder if when you ask these two companies to change what they're known for, and also the product, I mean, certainly with the success of Dark Knight right now, is it any different than popcorn action-adventure movies, not just superhero movies, but just action-adventure movies dominating Hollywood? And there are cries from creators saying, I miss the independent films. We need the independent films. We are neglecting them. What do you do, though, when the biggest grossing films are the action-adventure films? By the same token, right now, the biggest grossing comic books are the superhero comic books. I understand you're saying you can make a difference with less of an impact with your creator-owned book. But again, you're also calling for DC and Marvel to kind of, redirect their marketing strategies. And right now it ain't broke, so why fix it? I guess right now it ain't. I
would disagree that it's not broke. I mean,
okay,
we're not selling near the numbers that we've sold historically.
That's true.
Things are getting up, but aside from top mid-level books are like a successful mid-level book is like 40,000-50,000. A successful mid-level book,
back in the 70s
ago,
well, even back in the 70s, yeah.
I mean, what the hell? They were higher than what our highest books are now.
That's true.
We should not be as happy as we are. And I never said that we should do less superhero books, and I never said that Marvel and DC should not do superhero books.
Okay.
Marvel and DC do what they do, and I love superhero comics. Anybody that reads Invincible should know that. I don't think anyone should stop doing superhero comics. And the stigma of reading comics, I think that's dying down.
I agree with you.
I think that the movies are taking care of that for us. And every time there's a history of violence or Road to Perdition, or any of the number, Ghost World. I mean, we could sit here all day rattling off those movies, and
sure.
Not everyone knows that those are comic book movies, but awareness is spreading, and as time goes on, I think comics are a lot more respected. The Spike Awards, that's comics, and that's on mainstream cable network television.
Absolutely,
cable television. That's not cable network.
Well, it's basic. Yeah, it's basic cable though, and I think you're right. It's the highest cable audience.
Sure, and then you got Who Wants to Be a Superhero on Sci-Fi Channel. I mean, there's different stuff out there that's I don't know if that's necessarily respecting comics, to be honest. But anyway,
I kind of feel the same way. No offense, Stan, but I feel the same way, man.
I mean, no, I mean it's an awesome show, but anyway, you know, I mean, there are a lot of problems with the comic industry. But you know what, John? Like, how this is this? I mean, has this discussion that you and I are having right now?
Yes.
When is the last time you heard a discussion like this in the comic book press publicly? Because I hear it at conventions all the time.
I hear it at conventions. I hear it on other podcasts amongst the podcasters themselves.
Yeah.
Well, what industry, though, would give that kind of moment where competitors are going to come in and say, let's take a look at the state of the industry. We need to do something about it. I mean, do you see any similarities in some of these other competing media companies?
You're saying, like, what media or what industry has gotten to a point where they've rallied and circled the troops or circled the wagons and rallied the troops? And I don't know. Maybe it's never happened.
Okay.
You know? But that doesn't mean it can't.
Did you, I mean, have you included the other image guys again on this idea as well of, hey, we got to talk to the guys across the street and we should all get together? I like the cruise, by the way.
I just really want to go on a cruise, I'll be honest with you. You know?
Yeah,
but if Joker thought it has to be there, so be it. But
now you said nice things about Joe in the piece. So.
No, Joe is a super smart guy. I can't ever whatever. Like I'm not at Marvel anymore, but Marvel does really awesome shit. And can I cuss? I don't even know.
You can cuss. It's cool.
But like Joe turned that company around.
Absolutely.
You can't not give Joe the credit. You know?
I hear you. I completely agree.
And I mean,
I think there are a lot of good. Honestly, I'm not being a kiss ass around the industry right now. I think there are a lot of very smart, creative people at every company right now.
Yeah, and
I truly do.
And I'm saying, so there are. So let's have a talk. That's maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the time when there are enough super smart people at companies that there can be talks that are done. And you know what? If that talk is just between Marvel and DC, so be it. I don't care. As long as there's something being done to excite people, because people need to be excited about comics, and, bringing in new people, because we desperately need new people. I just got back from San Diego, and the only kids I saw that came up to get any autographs from me. And now I know I do older books. Like I've done Marvel Zombies, I've done Walking Dead. But the only kids I saw getting autographs were with their parents. And their parents were there to get autographs. And so their kids were obviously brought there. And I know that there's not a lot of, 13-year-olds that are going to be going to San Diego by themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say
But I didn't see the 13-year-old kid that has the dad that's completely uninterested that came just to bring him.
Yeah.
And I was that kid when I would go to conventions.
Well, San Diego has become its own crazy animal.
Exactly, but I mean, I'm just using Comic-Con as an example because I just got back from there.
I can understand that.
I cannot remember the last time.
How was Chicago? How was Chicago? Now, that was just a month ago.
Chicago was fantastic. I mean, I was just zipping around and,
Well, that's true. You were there hanging out, but did you, I guess you weren't at a booth proper, so I guess.
Look, my experience, I cannot remember. I know that there is one guy, and I wish I could remember his name. I saw him in Baltimore, and I wish I could remember his name. There was one guy that was 14, and I knew he was there. And I knew he was there for comics, and he wasn't there because his dad liked comics. Well, no, because he posted on my board. I think his name was Mike or something.
Okay.
And I saw him a few times in Baltimore because I did Baltimore 2 years in a row.
Sure.
And, that's sad. I remember the last, 14-year-old that came up to me that just wanted to get comics because that's the only one.
Okay.
And, maybe it's just my experience. But I've signed at the Marvel booth, and I've been one of, 8 guys sitting at that table. And so, I know that signing experiences are fairly similar, and I just don't see the kids. And I go into comic shops, and I do not see the kids. And I know that I've talked to store owners that say they do not see the kids.
Is
and there's 1,000 different ways to fix it, but I'm just suggesting one.
Okay, but is there an image solution to this problem as far as getting kids?
I don't think Image has the resources that Marvel and DC do as far as expanding the audience to children. It may eventually, but it's not there right now. And I think that Image's niche is mature superhero books that you cannot that can do things that you cannot really get from Marvel and DC, and things like The Walking Dead and The Sword, and like Image's thing is, I know everyone likes to say they're the HBO comics, but it's just like it's like a television station, and we do skewer mature with most of our stuff, and so no, I don't think Image is the solution. Image is a fine company, and they do a lot of things really well, and I'm happy to be there. But I don't think Image is the company that's going to be bringing the kids into comics this year or for the next 5 years. But I mean, eventually that may change.
But that original group was you were at the age that you were aiming at as far as the teenagers.
I was 14.
Yeah, and it hit you right, so it was appropriate enough for you back then.
Yeah, but I mean, Image is a small company. Image just doesn't have the resources to be like making aggressive marketing plans and also the icons, the kids. I mean, I jumped from Marvel to read Image Comics, but I don't know if I would have started reading comics just because of Image Comics. Lunchboxes and T-shirts and underoos and slippers. That's what brings kids to comics. Television shows. That's what the kids need. And maybe the Invincible MTV thing. I mean, that's what that's the whole reason I did that. And fine, I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I don't know if that's going to work. But, it's things like that bring kids to comics.
Can't hurt. I mean,
definitely can't hurt. And if I get one 16-year-old because of that MTV thing, it will have done its job. Well, it will have been 100% worth it if I just get one 16-year-old to read Invincible that didn't read it before.
Well, I was a 20-something when HBO was doing the Spawn cartoon, and I'm sure there were kids, sneaking around and watching watching
they had to
Todd's
be staying
cartoon.
Up pretty late for that one.
That's a good point. But,
yeah.
Well, it was Friday nights, though, man. I don't know.
That's true. No, a lot of people have bad parents, so I'm sure they were watching stuff pretty late. They were probably sitting there with their parents' crack pipe watching Spawn.
Nice. When does, while we mentioned the Invincible cartoon, when does that start?
It's already started. The first six episodes are on iTunes now, and you can watch the first 6 episodes at MTV.com somewhere.
Okay. And I know you've got your stuff up at Spike as well with Battle Pope. I'm
all over the net.
Yeah.
And Battle Pope's doing really well at Spike, so, I mean, Spike's excited. I haven't heard if we're going to be doing more or not, but, I'm game, so we shall see.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm going to be bringing any kids to comics with Battle Pope. I just don't.
I understand.
I tell you what, though, the kids that are brought into comics by Battle Pope are totally awesome guys.
No,
if you're a 14-year-old and you're reading Battle Pope, right on. That is a guy I want to hang out with. That guy's probably going to grow up to be totally awesome.
I just want to clarify again, because I understand what you're saying as far as inviting creators to think more about doing creator-owned stuff, but I also, can't deny that I don't want to lose the talented people that we have in the mainstream right now doing great mainstream stories. I mean,
Sorry. No, I'm not even joking. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Comics are not for you. You're an old bastard. Like, Frank Miller could have done Batman the whole career, but do you like Sin City?
I love Sin City.
Okay. So everybody that's doing the Marvel and DC books that you love could have something awesome in them, and they may not. And you know what? If they go and they do something awesome that doesn't catch on, there's nothing saying that if they're still awesome, they can't go back to Marvel and DC. I'm not saying burn a bridge, and I'm sure Marvel and DC would hire them back. But you know what? Come on, man.
But I love what Jeff Johns is doing with Superman right now.
Sure.
Grant Morrison, All-Star Superman, wonderful book.
Awesome.
Frank is back doing All-Star Batman. What about the guys like the Kevin Smiths and the Mark Guggenheims and
there's room for everything.
But I'm saying the film and TV people that are coming in and they want to kind of there is something to be said, as you yourself admitted, to getting your jollies off, getting the opportunity to writing Superman and Batman for a while your name is hot.
Absolutely, and do that. But you know what? Don't just do that, and don't aspire to only ever do that. Is all I'm saying. And if you do, that's fine. Everything is fine. But if more people left to do creator-owned stuff because they wanted to, and I talk to people at conventions, I know that a lot of people want to, and they just don't know if they can. Okay? If they did, I think that everything would be better off. There would be a gap to be filled. Marvel and DC would have to, like, find a different audience. If the older audience, like you and me, followed the creators, they would have to find an audience that the creators weren't so important to. Okay?
Sure.
That's kids. That forces them to market to kids. And that's important. And I think that could be revolutionary. Okay? That's all I'm saying. And, you know, like, if they start marketing to kids more, and kids aren't that, you know, big on creators, like they're just reading the characters, and if the stuff is good, like, then they're not, you know, Marvel's making more money because they're not paying guys as much because they're newer guys that are coming in. And I just think that the cycle should be changed. It shouldn't be slave away on creator-owned stuff, not making a dime until you get noticed, because that's what people are doing now. And then when they get noticed, they go off and they do corporate comics, and they make their money, and maybe they straddle both sides of the fence like I've done until now, and they make their money, and they're creatively fulfilled, but they just keep doing it. They keep doing it. And you know, like, I'm just saying, like, once you get to the top or the middle, you know, if you do want to do creator-owned stuff, do it.
All right.
And I'm not ordering people to do stuff.
Oh, I understand.
I'm just suggesting, and I'm saying that it can be done.
And I can appreciate that from a creator standpoint.
I mean, I'm trying to do this in the friendliest way possible.
Of course you are.
I'm not out to get Marvel and DC. You know, I'm not out to do that. They're always going to be number one and number two, and that is totally fine. They've got the icons. I love the icons. I love those books.
But why limit them with the icons to, again, entertain a specific audience? Where, you know, I mean, movie studios can do whatever. I mean, you know, Disney finally got into the adult film business. I mean that, you know, with quotes, but you know what I'm saying, with touch-tone films. And having
adult business with touch-tone films?
Well, but you know what I'm saying, as opposed to just sticking with Goofy and Mickey and Donald Duck.
Sure. I was just making a joke about the word touch being in something after you said adult films. But,
I'm sorry, Beavis, I didn't catch that, but thank you.
Whoa, hey. Wow, see, I liked how you were playing devil's advocate the whole time, but I didn't know this was going to get downright hostile.
Oh, it's not hostile at all. And I honestly, we're just.
I will tackle you. I will drive to Chicago right now, and I will take you out. We will have a big head fight.
Kirkman, you got 15 years on me. I have no doubt that you could put me down flat very quickly.
Guy with the biggest head wins. And that guy is me.
No, and honestly, this is a friendly discussion. There's no hostility on either side. And I can read between the lines, and I know you are sending out a call to action to creators.
Sure.
Primarily. You are also, though, suggesting that these two companies that are at the top kind of pull back their sandbox and only play with younger kids and let these other companies have the big boys. I don't understand why they can't provide a service for everyone, and the smaller companies like boutique movie studios can do what they do best. Image can do what it does best. Dark Horse can do what it does best. Same with Boom. Oni Press does, wonderful, interesting creator-owned books. There's always room on my bookshelf for both. I will read, as you said, you will always read Spider-Man because you're a fan or you're an X-Men fan. I like this era of being challenged by better writers. There was always a Frank Miller, one Alan Moore, people like that. There seem to be more of those creative minds in comics than ever. And I'm really pleased to see that. And I want them to take advantage and get better known and do their own creator thing. But I also want them to continue to, if they've got a new spin on Superman, that's great. Again,
you're not the audience that I'm after.
Okay.
You're not the audience that I'm talking about. And, I don't mean to be so, that sounded a little harsher than I expected it to, but whatever. I agree with you. I agree with you, I don't know, 100%, whatever.
Plus, we can afford the product, too, man.
There's still room for those guys to do stuff. I mean,
sure.
If All-Star Superman existed, and it does, but I mean, if there was All-Star Superman, and that's awesome, one of the best books being published right now, but then that's another continuity. That's not, that's a different thing. But if the main superhero books, if the main Superman books at the same time were skewed younger, and weren't. So, I mean, they're a bit graphically violent. That's all I'm talking about. There's, if a guy just wants to do, I'm not lying. I could be doing Spider-Man in 10 years. Sure. I could go back and do Spider-Man for a little bit. But the point is, Spider-Man's not the top for me. And I don't feel like Spider-Man should be the top for everybody. You know, doing that Pulp Fiction sequel and doing a James Bond movie is like not the top for everyone.
I hear you.
A lot of creative people should create. And if you don't aspire to create, that's fine. But if you aspire to create, just recognize that Spider-Man is not the top and that your creation is waiting for you. And you should give it a shot.
Okay. Now, I will admit, this is a crass devil's advocate question, but I'm going to throw it out there. That's here's the wind-up. It could be said...
Don't ramble, because I lose track of the question sometimes.
Well, I have this written so that I know what I'm saying. It could be argued that this is really nothing more than a savvy call on your part for creators to come and bring more work to Image, because... After all, Image is like the only one that has an open submission policy and a fully creator-owned relationship with the work.
Fully creator-owned, and you keep 100% of your movie rights. But go ahead and finish your question.
That is the finish of my question. Honestly, that this is, right now the focus is on you being an Image partner. I think everyone that reads and follows the comic book industry will say that you are one of these guys that literally grew up on Image and found the right formula of being very successful making Image books. The partners clearly recognize that. They want to bring you in this respect. So, yeah, I mean, this is like a good opportunity for you to kind of just throw out a little public statement saying, come on in, the water's fine.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
There you go.
That's exactly what I'm doing. And, you know, the come on in, the water's fine. But, like, I'm not, I'm not the publisher. I'm not just a guy that's saying, come to Image, come to Image, come to Image. At the same time, I'm also a creator who has done creator-owned stuff since the first day that his first book was published.
Yep.
And I'm a creator that's been at Marvel for the last 4 years, and I'm a creator that's taken the plunge. Okay? And so it's not like I'm just, you know, some corporate guy that's saying, come to Image, come to Image, come to Image. I'm saying...
You're a foot soldier.
I'm happier.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happier, and it may work for you, too. If you want to do creator-owned stuff, and your name has gotten to a certain level where it can sell books, it can be done. And, you know, if that's what you want to do, it should be done. Because there are so many artists and writers that are just sitting around going, yeah, you know, I really, really wish I was doing my own thing. I really wish I didn't have to get approval. And that's who I'm talking to. And if they want to go to Dark Horse, they can go to Dark Horse. I don't care. I mean, I honestly, I don't care. I mean, if they can get a better deal, that's fine. And if they can't, you know, that's fine. But, like, you know, I'm not going to say I just want everyone to be happy. But I really do. I hate sitting here at conventions, hanging out at the bar, and people come up to me and they're like, "Man, you know, I just wish I was doing what you're doing. I don't know how you like made that work." And it's like, well, you know, it's not that hard. It can be done. And, you know, like, my contact information is public. If you want to ask me some questions and see if I'm completely full of crap, you know, give me a call. But, you know, that part of it, yeah, I mean, sure, it might seem a little self-serving, but at the end of the day, I know that there are people that are out there that are unhappy, and we're here for them. And I know that there are people that are out there that are not unhappy. And, you know, they're fine. That's fine. If you're happy doing what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing.
All right. Very cool.
And that's exactly what the thing was. It's a call to arms, come do creator-owned stuff, and then the second part of that is, yeah, Marvel and DC. Like, aren't I a dick? You know? Like, did I just say that? Like, whoa, holy shit, guys, I'm sorry. But, guess what? Here's what I think. If this does cause a mass exodus, which, you know what, it's probably not. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
If it does cause a mass exodus, here is how you can use that mass exodus to your advantage. And so, don't assassinate me. I would not be out here doing what I'm doing if I was not completely content to never do another Marvel and DC book. And I know that if I keep writing good comics, and I like my books, they're okay.
I like your books too.
If I keep doing good books that people like, you know, I'm not out there saying crazy stuff. I'm not out there attacking anyone. You know, as long as I'm not being psychotic and I'm doing good stuff, you know. If I can sell a book, they're going to let me sell a book for them.
Sure.
And so at the end of the day, like, whatever. I'm trying not to burn a bridge. I have friends at Marvel and DC. I have friends doing books there, and I have friends that are editors at both companies, you know. And I you know, I've been talking to Dan DiDio. I know Joe Quesada. I mean, you know, they're not doing a bad job. I'm not trying to say bad things about their companies. So, you know, I'm playing nice.
That's cool. That's cool. And you still have product to come from both companies as well.
And let me say, like, you know, the stuff that's coming from Marvel. Yeah, am I interrupting like every question you try to ask?
No. I think
okay,
I think we're at a good point right now.
I'm saying that I'm doing this Destroyer Max series with Cory Walker. It's one of the best things I've ever written. Image, Marvel, wherever. I love it. I had a blast finishing those scripts. It's the first time I've ever gotten to work with Axel Alonso, and Axel Alonso is one of the best editors in the industry. And I am 100% committed to that book. And, you know, it's a Marvel book. But you know what? I like Marvel. You know, I'm not there anymore. But, you know, like, buy that book. And I gave that book my all. And when that thing comes out, I think people are really, really going to dig it. And Cory Walker is killing on that title. And that, I mean, seriously, like, that's going to be a cool book. And when that book comes out, like, if they'll let me, like, do interviews, and I'm sure I can do interviews on my own without them knowing, like, I'm totally going to participate in the promotion of that book. Like, I'm not looking at this like, oh, you know, screw these guys. You know, I still have stuff at Marvel that's coming out. My Killraven series is going to rock.
Looking forward to
Rob Liefeld is kicking ass on that thing. I'm trying to say word for word exactly what I said about Cory, but I'm not doing it. But that book is going to be really cool. I mean, you know, it's a cool concept that Rob came up with. It's the artifacts of the Marvel Universe in the future, and, you know, it's a bunch of guys forming the future Avengers to take down the Martians that have enslaved the human race. And like, it's really cool, and it's new ideas at Marvel. Like, both of those are like new ideas at Marvel.
Yes.
Because Destroyer is like a rebirth of a 40s character, and Killraven is a completely new take on Killraven. And, you know, they're almost like creator-owned books, but, you know, they're not, and that's cool. You know, I went into it with my eyes open, and I had a blast, and I don't regret a second of it. You know, I created more villains in Destroyer in the 6 issues than I did in the first, like, 12 or 24 issues of Invincible, and I created them for Marvel. You know, and that's fine.
Okay,
it's fine. Like, whatever. Like, I didn't hate my time there. You know,
good. Okay,
it's just that no one is doing what I'm doing right now. You know. No one is saying publicly, like, nope, not going to do any of that stuff, going to do my stuff. Because, look, and I'm rambling, and this is going to be long, but
it's not long.
When I went to Marvel, I thought I was on the Bendis plan. I had done creator-owned stuff. The creator-owned stuff had gotten popular. Like, Bendis' creator-owned stuff had gotten popular, you know? Like, he was doing, like, Powers and Sam and Twitch and that kind of stuff. And I was doing Invincible and Super Patriot and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I was looking at how parallel our careers were. Now, I did it a little faster than him. That's a little nudge. But, you know, I got into Marvel. And I got into Marvel on Captain America. I did 4 issues of Captain America. He started on a little stint on Daredevil, you know? And then, like, he went off and did Elektra and some other, like, low-selling, crappy Marvel titles.
Wait a minute, did he? Well, I think you've successfully blocked out Ultimate Spider-Man, though, didn't you?
Yeah. I'm not talking about that. But
right there, right there is 5 pages of message boards. Oh, I can't believe Kirkman would do that.
Oh, come on. But no, I mean, like, and then, you know, like, I had Marvel team up and different stuff like that.
Yes.
I didn't have an Ultimate Spider-Man, and so I was very, very quickly aware that I was not on the Bendis plan, okay?
Okay.
But, like, I went to Marvel, like, okay, like, if I just try and do the same kind of projects and I try and control my career like Bendis did, you know, Bendis is a great guy, and I still consider him to be a friend. I hope that we're cool. I hope that, you know, me talking out like this isn't going to make him angry, because I could take him. I mean, I really could. I could probably just walk up and kick him like a football. I mean, let's just like his whole body would just soar off into the distance. Okay, so as I'm, you know, at Marvel, I start to realize, like, Bendis ain't going anywhere. Okay, I'm not on the Bendis plan. There is no Bendis plan. Bendis is Bendis, and I'm Robert Kirkman. You know, because I started out pretty young. You know, there is no Bendis plan. There's this. The guy is not going anywhere. There's no way that I'm going to eventually get to the level that he's at unless I wait around for, 30 damn years? You know? Like, come on. And so I'm like, okay, so that's a misconception. Like I'm totally not there. You know, that's not something that's in my future. And then I start to realize, like, the books that I want to do at Marvel do not exist. They just don't exist anymore.
In what way?
I want to have the run on Hulk that Peter David had, and I want to have the run on Thor that Walt Simonson had, and they just don't exist. I want to have the David Michelinie Spider-Man thing. Like, I want to do an Amazing Spider-Man book that's Amazing Spider-Man, but I don't want to play with anybody else. I don't want to work with anybody else. I don't want to have to, lead into the crossover and play with the crossover and work with the lead in with the side books and tie in with the side books and have the crossover with the side books and you know what, like, if I was writing Amazing Spider-Man and they were like, okay, well, you're going to go write Web of Spider-Man this month because you're part of the crossover, and then someone else is going to write this issue, I'd be like, what the hell? You're breaking up my run.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
And there's no way that anyone is going to have the cachet or whatever to have the power to just be like, no, I'm writing Amazing Spider, like Straczynski. You know, like Straczynski still had to participate in crossovers and whatnot, and it helped the book. It made it sell better.
But
I'm never going to be as popular as Straczynski, and so the Amazing Spider-Man book that I've wanted to write since I got into comics is called Ultimate Spider-Man. But other than that, it doesn't exist. Okay? You know, like, you can't really be on your own out there saying, this is Spider-Man, this is my mark on Spider-Man. This era of Spider-Man is all me. And that's what I wanted to do. You know?
Well, and I guess you're right. Now, there are a couple other creators beyond Bendis that do get to say no. Two things, because I do want to understand.
No, there's not. And even Bendis, to a certain extent,
what about Brubaker?
No.
But what about Brubaker in Captain America? Now, he hasn't had to participate in World War Hulk or Secret Invasion with Captain America in his book. He hasn't had his run interrupted.
Well, I guess that's a good example. I mean, you know, whatever. He still had to participate in House of M.
I guess one issue. Yeah, I guess one issue. And that's true.
You know, I mean,
and maybe because of that,
I think it's the power of the death of Captain America that's making that example. I mean,
okay, yeah,
they don't want to interrupt the death of Captain America arc that they can sell those big omniboo of or whatever.
No,
so yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think and that specific run has been given license to do its own thing, and I think you're right. I think, unlike the eras that you just talked about, I think there is a general editorial feeling of, no, let's, Well,
that's what sells comics right now, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so instead of sitting around and pouting about it, I left.
I understand.
You know?
Okay.
But, I mean, I'm just talking about me at this point. Right?
Sure.
You know?
Oh, no,
it's like once I realized that the Spider-Man book that I wanted to do would probably never be something that I could do, it was like, okay, well, what's next? And I started to realize, like, I can go be Robert Kirkman. I can be the guy that's out there going, create our own stuff, rah, rah, rah. And, and so here we are.
Well, I know other creators that have said the same thing about that they had a very specific run in mind and events. And this isn't even a Marvel situation. I know DC guys that have been faced with the same problem.
Yeah. And again, I don't say that as a criticism of Marvel and DC. That's what sells comics, and that's what their job is. That's fine. I'm not saying Marvel sucks now because there will never be another run of Hulk like Peter David.
Sure.
I mean, if the books are selling, the books are selling. And then the books aren't selling as much as Peter David's Hulk run sold, I'm sure. But, I mean, they're doing what they need to do to sell comics, and that's, that's fine for that situation. But later, if they have that mass exodus, I think they should rethink things.
No, I understand. I also think that there was a generation of creators, and maybe before you were reading, but I can think of a lot of guys from the 80s that were very big that aren't around anymore because they kind of priced themselves out of the mainstream, and this was the pre-Image era, or
Now, they've also tried to do some creator stuff. I can think of a few guys, and I won't name anybody specifically, but I've seen them at conventions, and I've had them on the show and done interviews with them, and have read interviews where they were the it guy for Hero B, and they're not with Hero B anymore because they kind of priced themselves out of working for the big two. They've tried to create their own stuff, and again, for whatever reasons, they're not able to make that profit that you have specifically been able to make.
Well, you're going to strike while the iron's hot. I mean, if you do Batman up until the height of your popularity, and then when Batman stops selling because you're on it, and then you're like, oh, well, I can't sell Batman anymore. I guess I'm going to go do my creator-owned stuff. Like, if you can't sell Batman, you're not going to be able to sell your creator-owned stuff. You need to do a nice, kick-ass 6-issue run of Batman, and when people are like, oh, my God, that was the best Batman run I've ever read. He is the best Batman creator ever. I wish that he was going to do Batman for the rest of his life. That is awesome. You go, hey, guys, fuck you. No more Batman. now you got to go. Now, since you loved my... No, seriously. Now because you love my Batman so much, and because you love me so much, because I did this awesome, awesome Batman, now I'm going to go to this other guy. And this other guy's not Batman, but he's totally friggin' awesome, and you're going to have to read his book, because you're not going to get me on Batman anymore. Now you have to get me on this guy. And if only, this is something that creators need to realize, if you're selling 150,000 copies of Batman, I know what people's rates are, to
right.
a certain extent. Like, I know the range where people work.
Sure.
You have to sell 30,000 copies of your creator-owned book to sell, to make about as much as they're paying you to do Batman.
Well, how many guys are doing their creator-owned book that are able to match that money?
What do you mean?
Like, how many guys like yourself are, doing it? Like you said, for instance, Walking Dead, 25,000.
Sure.
And you're making a decent, amount of money.
I wasn't doing Batman that was selling 150,000 copies.
Well, there you go.
And the guy that's doing Batman that's selling 150,000 copies isn't going to do creator-owned stuff. I mean, he's not doing it right now. So there's no example. But, Mark Miller, pretty damn hot.
Sure.
Kick-ass,
yes.
60,000 copies.
Yeah.
And War Heroes is doing something like 30-something or 40-something. And so it's, there's an example. And then, what? Vertigo books count. Brian K. Vaughan selling like 30,000 copies of his Why the Last Man book. And trades. Walking Dead sells 25,000, okay?
Yep.
But, we've sold over 100,000 copies of almost every volume of that trade paperback.
That's great, man. Good for you.
I mean, I'm not saying that so that you can congratulate me.
No, but I'm congratulating. I am honestly.
I appreciate it. No, I mean, don't get me wrong.
I know what you mean.
I appreciate. I will punch your big giant head. I will.
No, but I hear what you're saying, man.
I don't like, I'm not beating my chest here. I'm just saying.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying.
It can be done.
Maybe Walking Dead would sell more if we sold less trades, and
No, but you're
I
saying
don't
it can be
care
done
because I make money off both.
Sure.
And so I'm making a good living, and when I say I'm making money, like, I'm not saying, oh, I'm making money, I got in this for the money. I got in this to write comics, and if I'm making a living writing comics, I'm happy because I get to keep writing comics.
Absolutely.
If I was just in this for the money, I would quit.
No, I understand, Robert. No, I totally, honestly, man.
I'm just saying that because I don't want people to be listening to this and going, this guy's all about the cash. He's been talking about money.
But you're you got to make a living. You got to, as an adult, you have to pay the bills. And why not do it? Exactly. And why not do it doing something you love?
Sure.
So I completely understand. Dude, this is why I do Word Balloon. It's the same reason. I have to keep my day job in radio, though.
I thought it was because you like the sound of your voice. And to be honest, I understand why you like the sound of your voice, because you have a really good voice. I wish I had the voice you had. I really do. I really do. And I should point out that I'm getting a little hoarse now, and it's because I'm still, suffering from San Diego all this time after. So.
No, I understand, man. It is the post-con hangover, and I can appreciate that. It
makes me sound cool because sometimes I have a pretty deep voice. It's like, whoa, look at that. I wish I talked like that all the time. My wife would totally respect me. But
no, man. I understand where you're coming from, and that's one of the reasons why the video itself intrigued me, and also just your post-con statements.
I'm glad we did this follow-up, or are doing this follow-up. I don't know if we're wrapping up here or not, but I'm not saying I have all the answers. And, I only said that, like, I left Marvel Comics to save the entire comic book industry, because I only said that because I knew that what I was saying was going to be fairly long, and it wasn't scripted, and so it was going to be kind of rambly. And so I was like, if I start with something like that, people are going to be like, oh,
do tell.
This guy is crazy. I have got to listen to every word. And so, I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers. I'm just sitting here saying I see problems, and everyone else sees problems, and everyone else seems to be waiting for someone to fix them. And we have so many smart people in this industry that we can do things that will make us happier. We can all do exactly what we want to do. We can sell comics, and if we work together and we communicate and we brainstorm together about all kinds of different things, and we pool our resources and blah, 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 we can make things better. And we should be talking about that.
That's good.
There's nothing stopping us from trying.
Well, I like that, and it is one man's opinion, one creator's opinion,
and if that drives people to Image Comics, hey, sounds great. But that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is making sure that my grandkids can read comic books on their projection screen coming off their fingernail.
It's not going to be beamed directly into our brains,
or beamed directly into our brains.
Okay.
What are you having today? Oh, Spider-Man.
Let me jack in.
Look at my eye twitching. Yeah. No, I mean, it's just, we're all getting old, man. We're all getting old. And
said the 30-year-old. I love that, man.
Oh, stop it.
I understand where you are at 29 because I think everybody feels this way, and it's where am I in the world? And honestly, no.
It's my midlife crisis.
No, it's not a midlife crisis at all. No, this is a time of passage. This is what happens where you kind of step around and go, all right, what's
that? Don't dismiss me because I'm turning 30 this year.
And I'm not dismissing you.
Because that big head already deserves a punch, and I tell you, buddy. I tell you.
I'm not dismissing you at all. Absolutely not. No, hey, man, you're in a very unique position right now. And I can appreciate the success you're feeling, and also that, hey, you just came out of an experience of working at the Big Two, and you're just giving your view. That's cool. And I was just going to say, I think it's interesting, and it's opening a dialogue that, as you say, is spoken at conventions, but isn't really talked about by professionals. And Miller kind of, I remember at the Harvey Awards about 10 years ago, kind of had his own little, wait a minute, are we going in the right direction? Are we doing the right thing? And it's fair for a creator to make that point. And I think that's, that's the hope for this show. I want to give creators the opportunity to go beyond just, plug in their products and really talk about comics and where the business is going. So this has been great. And I mean,
it has been great, hasn't it?
Well, no, honestly, I'm happy to continue the conversation if you want.
But I appreciate the opportunity to explain myself a little further and discuss the matter a bit more, and talk about how gigantic our heads are, and joke about kicking Bendis like a football.
Well, and rather than close doors for your career, I hope this does open dialogue where the companies do have an opportunity to talk and say, where are things? Because 2008 is a watershed year for the business, and it's going to be interesting to see where the business goes next. And I see this as a veteran of the radio business that is in a different direction. and these types of questions and discussions should be going on. So I thank you for using my platform to voicing your views, and I welcome you to come back, and we can talk more about this, and also just have a silly conversation as well. But I'm happy to extend the invitation as well to other creators who want to just talk about this in general, of where comic books are right now, where they're going, and
yeah, definitely. If you're out there and you're totally pissed off and you want to rip me a new one, I am ready. I totally want to hear that.
Well,
John.
No. No.
No, I'm serious.
Well, hey man, I know you like to put your email on a lot of these articles that have come out of late and said, hey,
not this one.
Okay. Take no calls.
No, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm
I know
phone number on here too. No, I mean it's Kirkman at Funkotron.com.
There you go.
And it's on my website, and I, whatever. I'm there. So that's cool.
Well, that's cool, Robert. I hope that people understand where you're coming from, that they will take the time to listen to this. You're a hell of a writer, and it's always a pleasure reading your stories, and I look forward to continuing. And not only the stuff that is coming from Image, like The Astonishing Wolfman and Invincible and The Walking Dead.
Astounding Wolfman.
Damn it.
So bad.
So close. Well, I knew it was an adjective of some sort.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an adjective of some sort. But no, I mean,
the neatly groomed Wolfman. But no, honestly, I really am looking forward to the Marvel stuff as well. And I know you put your heart into it. And I know that you, while have parted ways with Marvel, mean no ill will by this discussion.
No, absolutely. I still buy as many Marvel books now as I ever did, and let me tell you what, that's a lot. I buy a lot of comics, and I buy a shit ton of Marvel and DC books, and they appeal to me because they're written for me. And I'm not going to restart my discussion, but appreciate you having me, and I hope that next time I'm on, I'll try to be funnier. I promise.
Okay, so that was my initial conversation with Robert about his manifesto, and Brian right away was like, "Hey, I want to talk about this," and I said, "Okay." So it was part of a Bendis tapes, but I know I released it prior to the full Bendis tapes of that period as a separate thing because it was a good 40-minute hunk of Brian kind of, frankly, it was a rebuttal, and just a different point of view on this subject. And certainly Brian, again, is a guy who was making his own comics, so it's not like Brian completely disagreed with what Robert was saying, but there were some shades of difference. And in fact, it culminated in a great panel that the two guys did at Baltimore Con later that summer. And man, they asked me, "Hey, do you want to moderate?" Still kicking myself. 11 years later, why couldn't I go? Why didn't I make the time? But, was working full-time radio and, hey, can you drop everything and fly to Baltimore? No, I can't. So I believe Ron Richards of iFanboy was the moderator of the panel they ended up doing at Baltimore Con. I think you could find that on YouTube. Not my material, so I didn't feel right to include it in this thing. But this is good because everything was kind of fresh, and this shows you where Bendis' head was when the subject was first presented to him and his initial feelings. So now here is Breian Bendis' rebuttal to the Kirkman Manifesto on Word Balloon. Regular Word Balloon listeners know that Robert Kirkman recently started an open dialogue to creators. His mission statement was a call to arms for writers and artists to weigh the advantages of making creator-owned comics versus making corporate comics as work for hire at DC or Marvel. Creators have written blogs, message board threads, and have been interviewed on podcasts and websites giving their perspective. Marvel writer Breian Bendis made his views known in a still-to-be-released new edition of the Bendis tapes. Well, we're not stupid. This is clearly the subject of the moment. In fact, if you haven't heard Kirkman's conversation, I urge you to go back a couple episodes and listen to his Word Balloon interview. But for now, we present this interesting conversation where Bendis discusses the points of Kirkman's view. The full Bendis tapes will be presented in the days ahead. But for now, here's another great discussion in the world of comics from Word Balloon. Okay, and here we go, kids. It's time for the Megillah.
This is what you want to hear.
Exactly. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this Kirkman statement from a recent Word Balloon episode? Zorn points out these specific quotes.
Yes, the one that you highlighted.
When I went to Marvel, I thought I was on the Bendis plan. I had done creator-owned stuff, it had gotten popular, and I was looking at how parallel our careers were. But then I realized Bendis ain't going anywhere. There is no Bendis plan. I realized the books that I want to do in Marvel don't exist anymore.
That's my favorite part, by the way.
No, it really was funny to hear. I don't know if you actually heard the interview, but it was funny when he came to that realization. I realized that books that I want to do at Marvel don't exist anymore. I want to do a run like Peter David had on Hulk or Walt Simonson's Thor. I want to do an Amazing Spider-Man run that doesn't have to lead into the crossovers or the side books. And there is no one who has the cachet to say no to major company events. Straczynski had to participate in events, and it did help his book sell. But he couldn't say no to events, and instead of sitting around pouting about it, I left. And I'm not saying that Marvel sucks now. They're doing what they need to sell books.
Okay. I'm not looking to get into a feud or to turn this into a thing that people like to turn it into.
Okay.
But if I honestly respond to what Roberts, who I have obviously a lot of respect for, I wrote the introduction to Invincible. I was one of his cheerleaders getting him into Marvel in the first place. I'm not responsible for him getting into Marvel, but his first job was on Disassembled, and they knew how I felt about his work and knew that would be something I would be excited about. And they were very, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm very involved. And Robert will cop to the fact that all through whatever, different variations as you dive into the weirdness that is freelance work for hire companies, I've been there for Robert. Robert knows this. I've been a pal to him when he needed me to be a pal. I was there. And
he has said so. Yes.
Yes, and he said so. And I'm not patting myself on the back or claiming anything other than the fact that just letting people know who may not know that I'm a fan of Robert's, and we goof on each other in the letter columns and the message boards because we both have a similar sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And a lot of similarities in the things that we think about. But recently, maybe since his Image partnership, the statements that he's made publicly, including the one you just read here, I don't agree with anything that he said. I mean, to the point where the only word I can describe them to me is dopey. It sounds dopey to me, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And I would say this if we were on a panel. I would say this on the phone. I obviously was offended by the description of my Bendis plan, which does not exist. So he puts out a premise that I don't agree with, and then announces how it's a dumb plan, or I'm going no. He didn't say dumb plan, but
no, not at all.
It's a going nowhere plan, which is also ridiculous because obviously, not to be braggy, I'm doing all right for myself.
Well, he didn't say it that way, but I'm sorry. Please continue, and then
more people read it than heard it.
Okay.
And the words that were chosen were those words.
Okay.
And those words that I read did bother me. It just on a personal level, because I don't think they describe me in my career, and B, I don't think they were fair. I don't think they were fair. And I told them privately that, and Chuck Austin had done this once before too, where he was trying to prove a point and would use me or include me in his point, and I didn't agree with the point. And that's really my problem more than the personal thing.
I see.
I don't agree with the point. So please stop using my name to illustrate your point or to include me in your point. It's inappropriate. And what I think Robert will discuss, and here's the thing: is I'm really excited that Robert's excited, and I'm really excited that he's excited about creator-owned work. And I know that feeling, and I've lived with that feeling every day of my life since I discovered independent comics. And so, with that said, these things that he said further down the line, of course, it's great to be excited by creator-owned comics. It's almost like announcing you're anti-rape. Of course, you should be anti-rape. I'm against global warming. Really? Congratulations. That's great. You want the planet to live. I'm proud of you. But then to not really have anything to follow up it with that makes any sense, that's when it gets a little dopey to me. And I think what he's going to discover, or maybe he has, I don't know, maybe he won't, but I would say to him that the reason that he's seen some success in his creator-owned work is in part, not fully, but in part because of the audience that he's been able to garner from his Marvel work. Particularly if you look at the most successful thing that he did at Marvel was Marvel Zombies.
Sure.
And there's Walking Dead being his most successful title, and breaking all the rules of what a black and white book should do and all of that. So it's not the whole reason that book is a success, because no book or no movie or anything has one reason it was a success. There's always, if something is successful, it's for multiple reasons. But one of the reasons it's successful is because of the Marvel work. And now I'm going to stop talking about Robert directly and talk about myself.
Okay.
I know that the reason the Powers has been successful, and successful for a long time, and successful no matter how fucked up the schedule is because is in part because of the audience that I had built up through my years in independent comics, but also because of the audience that I have generated from interest in my work at Marvel. They liked what I did on Daredevil and heard that Powers was good too, and then they went and bought it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Alias and other things, and even Avengers, and even Secret Invasion. You know, every once in a while you get a Powers plug out there, and you know, there's a new reader.
Sure.
So it's, and I'm going to say this over and over again because I can feel this being the misquote online as I continue. It's not the only reason Powers is successful. It's one of them.
Certainly.
But it is one that to ignore it would be dopey. I'm going to keep using that word.
No, I'm with you.
All right.
Go ahead.
You know, so when he announces that all creators should come and do creator-owned work, I completely agree with that all creators should experience what that feels like to do creator-owned work. It is a very exciting, really amazing feeling. And for me personally, not for everybody, the two concepts, and I've talked about this on this podcast, doing both is very healthy for me. The excitement of doing whatever you want in Powers, plus the excitement of working on the greatest icons in the world and having the challenges that come with sharing characters and what have you, for me, they feed each other. Not only financially do they feed each other, but creatively they feed each other. There's two parts of my brain that are very close to each other, and it's very exciting for me. So I personally live by, and again, I'm going to stop myself because I'm going to just tell people that I do understand that for whatever time period that this is or however long it will last, and particularly since the year 1999, I've been breathing very rarefied air. I'm very, very lucky. I have been able to have my cake and eat it too for close to a decade in this comic book business, followed by a decade of not having my cake or eating it. So I felt both things and know what they feel like. But I understand that I'm one of the very few people, along with Ed and Robert and a few other people, who can have their cake and eat it too, can do creator-owned work and do mainstream work, and find some success either creatively or whatever in both fields. And I know that some people can't or aren't given the opportunity to, and some of it has to do with luck, and I understand that. But having experienced all the experiences I've had through comics and being a little older than Robert, I can look back and say, at this level of play, and that's the level of play that Robert's at and I'm at, that to ignore the fact that part of your audience came from your Marvel work is a mistake that I hope he doesn't discover the bad way, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
And I think that what's frustrating about the things that he said about people should just stop what they're doing to create their own work, or is that most of the Image founders rely on work for hire to keep their books going. Almost all of the founders quickly turn to work for hire to keep their books afloat. So that dichotomy that he was ignoring in his mission statement was frustrating, along with the idea that he thinks that you can't have your cake and eat it too, when really I think it's the best. I think really that's the goal, particularly for genre writers like myself and Robert, and that's really what we are. The other thing that bothered me is that there are hundreds of creator-owned comic book creators that don't follow this plan that I'm saying was good for me. And
Right.
I'm not saying that everyone should go out and do it. That's the difference between me and Robert. Robert wants everyone to do what he did. And I'm saying, no, you should follow your own muse. And you look at people like Adrian Tomine and Chris Ware, and just the list goes on and to these people who have absolutely no interest in doing superheroes or creator-owned work or really anything, but they're, I wouldn't work for hire, but doing anything for creator-owned work. It's an insult to them, to the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of creators that whose backs we are standing on, and whose creator rights they got us, to ignore the fact that not this simplistic view of creator rights or versus working for Marvel or DC, ignoring that aspect of it is a mistake, I think, and showed what worried me was I was worried that maybe he was maybe not aware of them or not aware of all that they had done for us. You know, particularly this generation of comic creator is standing on the shoulders of giants who worked very, very hard to make things very, very easy for us. And it was really just before I started making comics that things got a lot easier for people, and even things at Marvel and DC got a lot better for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
in the 80s, absolutely.
It's important for people, and what's cool about the thing that was great about what Robert did is it certainly started a dialogue, and it's a dialogue that clearly I love because I haven't stopped talking or have taken a breath in 5 minutes. But it's important that it be an educated conversation. It's important that it's a conversation that's not just a blank stare called to arms, but one that makes people really look into, well, what do I want? You know?
Sure.
The other thing that bothered me about Robert said is Robert was I'm excited that he's happy that his books are doing well, and I'm excited that he sees the possibility that could happen. But the truth of the matter is that Robert, too, is breathing rarefied air. And the fact that it seemed that he may not know that or doesn't want to reference that aspect of it, it's disturbing in his sales pitch, because the truth of the matter is, and this includes me, is that, you know, most Image comics don't sell what Robert's comics sell, even by name creators.
I agree.
You know, and the ones that do sell, and I hate to talk about other people's numbers, but like Mark Miller or Warren Ellis, but, you know, some of the stuff's public, but, you know, the ones that do sell over 6,000 or 4,000, which is basically what most Image comics sell, are guys that have that audience that they've built up from other areas of the comic book field. You know, Warren Ellis is the writer of X-Men, and Mark Miller is the writer of Civil War, and that is why those books sell more than other things. And again, I don't want to be having generalization, but, you know, you got to look at the reality of it, and really you got to hope for the worst when you're embarking on a creator-owned endeavor. And to think that you're going to sell what Walking Dead sells, or even what Invincible sells, is a mistake, and that would be a mistake going back to the early 90s when we were at Caliber.
Sure.
Because the numbers we did at Caliber, the numbers that Image does on most of their books, are very, very similar. And again, I'm not bashing Image. I'm just being frank with with how it is. And again, I'm not saying people shouldn't go to Image, and I loved my time at Image, and I'm just saying that even myself, when I was working on Torso sold 2,200 copies, and I made just enough money to make another one. Now, what was great about Image is that I could make another one. That, you know, I had a very healthy, happy home there.
Yes.
But I was not going to get rich there.
No, but as you said, yeah, it was because of your Marvel work that people have since reached back to those works and have kept them in print.
And I'm relieved beyond comprehension. So my difference, if I was discussing this with Robert, would be to tell people, oh, you can make a great living and blah blah blah. No, you can't. It's like saying, like, if you get a record deal, you'll be rich.
No, I understand.
You won't.
I understand.
It's a lottery ticket, and hopefully you'll cash out. But you should really be making the comics, particularly creator-owned comics, because you have to. Because you don't care if you get
It's in you. It's in you. You need to get it out. I understand.
The entire time I was working at Image Comics, I was also doing freelance illustration for American Greetings and drawing caricatures about mitzvahs on the weekend.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm the artist and writer that I turned into because of that struggle and all that. Even though, you know, it's hardly a struggle. It's like I was throwing fish across the room. But, it was.
I know what you meant.
It was a lot of work for what, you know, you never know if there's an end to it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I went 10 years. Yeah. My wife married me. There was no end in sight, you know?
Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying here is I'm describing what I think is a more realistic view of how things really are in the create-your-own comics world, and that I certainly hope, and I'm really looking forward to, the next batch of Image comics that come out, whether they're from name people or from people up and coming. But I think what I would tell Robert not to do is to paint such a rosy, one-sided picture of one or the other. I also obviously completely disagree with the theory that Marvel and DC should only be doing youth-oriented material and Image should be left to doing the adult material.
Okay.
That seemed odd to me as well. I obviously don't agree with that. I don't think any... It seemed odd that that someone is telling another company what... He's actually telling Marvel to tell their creators to limit their talents and abilities and creativity towards some market, particularly when I think we're all aware that there are kids reading comics. It isn't as many kids as when we were reading comics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
There are kids reading comics, and there are teenagers reading comics, and we see them at the shows, and we know that they're there. And every time a movie does hit, we do get a couple more. Do we get to keep them? I don't know if we get to keep them. You know, even the kids that read comics when we were reading kids didn't. They
didn't all stay. Right.
Yeah, they don't all stay, but it's not like everyone isn't trying to do this thing. So.
No, I understand, and I feel partly responsible for your reaction because you relied on the quote and didn't listen to my interview with him, because I think that 9 minutes of video didn't.
No, I listened to it.
Okay, because honestly, he agrees with a lot of what you said, and I think he was more saying what you just said in terms of make your name at Marvel and DC, and then by all means, start coming up with creator-owned books, and also. You are completely right, and I'm the first one who said your success, Robert, has kind of been like a lottery. You've hit on some commercial ideas, and I think he acknowledged that. Because he was saying, do what I did, get at Marvel and DC, let more people know about who you are, but don't stay there, and doing more like Frank Miller, Mike Mignola, Warren. Mm-hmm. I mean, yourself, but as opposed to keeping a foot in Marvel and DC. To obviously but just put your eggs in your creator-owned basket.
He did two things that bothered me in relation to me. Number one was using me as this example of what he thinks is a nowhere road.
Oh, but I didn't take the Bendis plan as that, honestly, Brian. It wasn't a nowhere road. It was more because
let's read the quote.
Well, yeah, but you see, I wrote the quote, and that's why I feel responsible for that. And it was and there's ellipsis there because it was Robert struggling to kind of come to words. And I'm telling you, if you had heard him, it was a lot of repeating. It was more of what you said in terms of use your celebrity from Marvel and DC to then take that next Frank Miller, Mike Mignola step. And get people excited about finding you. And then the only way that they're going to get your work is through your creator-owned stuff. And, you were obviously my first example of, well, then how do you explain Bendis, who clearly Ultimate Spider-Man was the first thing of yours I read, and then I reached back and started buying the Jinx books.
Right.
And a lot of people obviously did, and Powers, and a lot of people probably did that. And he said, sure, but what his fear is, and again, I'll say this because I did the interview. He's like, if you're putting out a book about Iron Man and you're doing a creator-owned book at the same time, more people are going to go to your Iron Man book because it's just an easy reflex. People know the character.
Yeah, I look at it the opposite.
Of course you do.
That Iron Man book is a commercial for you as an artist or writer.
Absolutely. And he also did say throughout, I could be wrong. This is just my feeling. And honestly, honestly, man, I feel like I kind of know both of you, not well, but at least I've spoken to both of you.
No, we've had
what I mean?
Conversations, sure.
Well, yeah, and honestly, I just kind of feel like, I don't want there to be a misunderstanding for either of you guys in terms of,
I'm not mad at him. I'm not mad at him. I'm just talking about two things that I wouldn't have done.
Okay.
Because there's been, ever since he came on, he has been kind of on one side of his mouth, kind of trashing Marvel and DC and his attempt to make Image look better. And it is
absolutely, and that's a marketing. I mean, that's definitely.
No, I know, and and I've said on my website, that's not a marketing tool that I particularly care for.
I understand.
And and listen, Eric Larson does it as well. And,
sure.
And again, I know it sounds like I'm trashing on them now, but I'm not doing it in the sense of I'm trying to sell you something. I'm just expressing an idea that I don't particularly care for it when other people do it. And I've seen a lot of people comics do it because they're frustrated or don't know how else to say,
I hear you.
So I know they're excited, and I know they really want people to buy the things they're producing more than they want people to buy what we're producing. I totally get that. But I think the best way to do that is to tell you what's great about you. It's
yes.
like it's like when a guy comes up to a girl, he's trying to get the girl's attention, instead of being cool or expressing what's cool about him, he's trashing her boyfriend.
Yes.
It's not the way. I don't think it ever works, quite frankly. If anything, it turns people off. And another thing too is this is, and again, I'm not talking about Robert in particular, but okay, let's like Civil War. Like when Civil War is out, there would be a lot of this. I wish people were buying this instead of Civil War, or the person saying my book's Civil War sucks, my book's awesome.
Right.
Well, meanwhile, everyone in comics is buying Civil War, and a great many of them enjoyed the shit out of it.
Sure.
So if you're announcing to the world that you think Civil War sucks and you should buy, and yours is better or something else, they're going to go, well, I like Civil War, so I'm probably not going to like his thing. You're probably cutting more people off than you even know.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying.
No, I
There's been a lot of that going on, and then it's snowballing. When I brought it up to Robert privately, he was like, "Hey, you're the number one. You're the dog." And I was like, "No. That doesn't mean I have to take it."
Oh, sure. No,
Yeah, not at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no. That's bullshit. That's horseshit.
That is bullshit. And you've got absolutely, man. No,
Yeah.
and use the blower, and I want your opinion. And honestly, you even said it yourself. This opens a dialogue, and I'm happy that this dialogue is happening because I think it's interesting.
Where Robert's heart's at is fantastic.
Okay.
But the things he's saying and what he's describing, and even what he's describing about Straczynski in this quote, and about these marvelous runs of Walt Simonson and Peter David being, everything looks like daffodils and roses
back then
versus whatever now. That's incorrect as well. I found it very simplistic and incorrect, and to guess that Straczynski wanted was forced in as some kind of crossover is completely incorrect, and not remembering that Walt Simonson's Thor issues had a Secret Wars 2 tie-in.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's easy to make everything look like roses and blowjobs back in the day, but it's incorrect. It's just flat out incorrect.
Okay.
So that's the facts he was using were bothersome to me. So I know we're talking at length about this, but it did seem what people wanted to hear.
That's the hit of the week, absolutely.
As a Howard Stern fan, when we're waiting all week because we know that Artie's in rehab and they gloss over it in 10 minutes.
Oh, Jesus.
We get frustrated. That I thought, okay, I'll talk about it endlessly to the point of annoyance, and then we can move on. But it's a very complicated subject, and I know it sounds maybe that I'm annoyed at Robert, and I really am not annoyed at Robert, other than the using of my name, which you've described as not what I thought it was. But
okay.
I'm a little sensitive, little Jewish gay man, and I'm gonna whine. Gonna whine and bitch.
No, but it's exactly the thing of quotes versus actually hearing an interview, which is always my fear. Yeah. And I will bring the entire Bendis board and my listeners.
You love it too?
I do. No. But hey, I'm not Rona Barrett. I'm not, and I love Rich Johnson, so I'm not going to say I'm not Rich Johnson because I like Rich, and I don't mean it. I don't want to misconstrue anything. But no, honestly, I'm just looking for good conversation. I'm never into like screwing up anybody's marketing schemes or anything like that. I don't need the get or the shitty, the nasty story. There's enough good things happening in comics, and I want people to talk about them. But I think this is an interesting discussion.
No, it is an interesting, and we're at an interesting time.
Yeah, exactly, Brian.
Maybe, and I would be thrilled if maybe a dam was breaking where some creator, because even when it happens, it's just funny too that every once in a while the dam breaks and some creator-owned books really take hold commercially.
Yes.
And we may be on the cusp of something like that. And of course, we don't know which books it will be or will not be. But people always that too. Even people remember as more than what it actually was. And it happens in film too, where a couple of films will really break out, and people are like, "Wow, people really like independent film instead of studio movies." But really, it's just like 10% more. It's not every, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so
and things will calm down again. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, because boy, that's the only thing that I really get worried about is the marketplace being what it is, where people aren't allowed to fall on their ass a few times, like I was, and Oming and
sure.
Ed Brubaker. I mean, really, we're allowed to like swim around and find ourselves for a couple of years in being published.
Absolutely.
And I worry that the market doesn't allow it as much, and I get fearful that people, you know what I mean? But then,
sure.
then again, we didn't, not to date myself dramatically, we didn't have the internet, so.
No, you're right, but let's focus on that generation before Image and before the internet too, because I think there are a lot of creators from the 70s and 80s that didn't, that did only toil at the big two, and maybe missed their opportunity while they were hot to capitalize on their storytelling ability to come up with their own ideas. Maybe they didn't have them, and that's something that Kirkman, obviously said too.
Well, that brings up a point that I was going to say earlier. A friend of mine and a friend of Robert, so I will not name here because he probably doesn't want to be named.
Okay.
Said that Robert's call to arms is falling on deaf ears in the sense that. Does he really think that there's anybody working in mainstream comics who is unaware that they have the ability to create their own comics if they so choose to? Of course they do. Of course they do. And again, that's back to the dopey thing. Of course, yeah, it's ridiculous. Of course they do. Whether they have, listen, being a publisher is a whole different set of muscles. And I am a publisher. And it is a completely different set of tools and muscles. And some people just don't have it in them. They just want to sit and draw their comics, man, and they just don't want to run a business, no matter what. And it includes some of the Image partners who, when it got to be, you know what I mean, when it got, man, I just want to draw my book. And some of them ended up not wanting to draw and just wanted to run their business.
That's true.
So again, I'm trying not to generalize. I'm trying to show that there's examples of all of these things.
Certainly.
And all you can really do is kind of put your foot out there and see what makes you happy. And when Mark started doing Millar World, for years prior to, I was needling him privately. You got to do creator-owned work. You got to do creator-owned work, not in sacrifice of his mainstream work. I just knew that he was missing part of the experience of comic book creating that would really excite the shit out of him. And
sure.
when it did excite the shit out of him, he went shot out of a cannon and was going crazy on the internet. And it was funny because he also was it's like when you first orgasm, you're like, wow, I can't wait to tell people about this. We have to tell people. This is an amazing feeling. Like, well, everyone else has had the feeling. I'm glad you've now discovered it, but it's cute. You know what I mean? It's funny, and I feel a little bit of this is what Robert's going through too. He's got this resurgence of enthusiasm.
Well, and also being 29, and I mean honestly, I feel.
By the way, he's not 29.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 29, and Brian K. Vaughn's 24. And
excellent.
Good. So I'm 70.
I was going to say, so I'm 38. But that's fantastic.
Yeah, they've all been making comics since I was in college, but yeah, all of a sudden.
Well, no, because honestly, I'm sure you felt the same. I think every person that is beyond that point in their life remembers at 29, where am I at the world? Where am I in the industry that I'm
Absolutely.
in? Am I making the right decisions for me?
Absolutely.
And that is not condescending to Robert, and I don't mean for it to sound like that. But that's what I mean. I really do believe that when you are at that age, you do ask that question, and, that's fine. Hey, he decided to do it, with a megaphone, and he chose mine, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. A megaphone, and also with the green screen, and banjo music.
That was not. No, those were. By the way, that was Jonah's choice. I know that for a fact because.
Okay, but listen. If I did not have my family and tons of shit to do, I swear to God, I would have made my own viral video with the green screen and Hava Nagila in the background. and the Jewish version of the Robert. I just didn't have time.
I don't know if your head would have come off as pointy and giant as his.
Oh,
stuff.
I could have done the whole thing. But and also, Robert, if Marvel and DC are not getting on a boat with you to discuss the future comics,
I shouldn't plan the cruise.
What, are you out of your mind?
I was all ready for the Word Balloon cruise and invite everybody else.
McDonald's and Burger King are getting on a boat together to see how to save the burgers. No, they don't want to kill each other. And I'm not speaking for Marvel. I'm not. You know what I mean?
I'm teasing you, of course.
I'm not speaking for Marvel. What, are you out of your mind?
Come on, like a cruise?
Let's all get on a boat.
That was my favorite part. He's like,
I did enjoy it too, but
No, and he even admits, he's like, I'm just angling for a cruise. That's all I'm trying to do.
That's great. Make a cruise. Make a Walking Dead cruise. Get all you guys dressed as zombies and go on a cruise.
But no, honestly, it certainly has reverberated around the podcast world, and I'm sure on a bunch of blogs and message boards.
It's been pointed out to me that the thread on my board is one of the most vivacious ones on the subject.
It got interesting.
and filled with people of immense talent who are arguing the points and trying to decipher the text of the Kirkman, and like Talmudic rabbis, which I appreciate. And all of them very worthy comic book creators whose passion has a home, like, you know what I mean? The fire in them is very exciting. So on that level, Robert can do this all he wants, you know, but I just felt that there were some inconsistencies and what I thought were inaccuracies to what he was saying that I thought were worth discussing. And again, I don't want to mix them up with my feelings on what I perceive to be a couple of pot shots here and there.
Okay.
Because I'm the dog or whatever the fuck.
No, well, you're the top dog. No, you know something? There was Sam Smith wrote a book in the 90s about the Bulls called The Jordan Rules. And I think I can see other potentially creators seeing that maybe, again, when you are in charge of, or at least the perception of, that you are in charge of an event, and I'm speaking now as a devil's advocate, that you are getting, stories, again, commercial stories that the company likes, but that maybe, you didn't have to your books didn't have to participate in World War Hulk because they were busy doing their.
The Avengers were a big part of it, and I bowed out of that one.
Absolutely.
No one forced me. No one said, "Here's how it is." I bowed out because I thought at the time you didn't need my name on every fucking thing, and you didn't need it. But that was just an example. Again, I know I'm breathing rarefied air. I do know.
Oh, I know you do.
I know that other people have different examples or feel different pressures from editors or whatnot have you. But all I can do is the reason I think I've been able to last longer than some where I am is because I've never varied from treating people the way I want to be treated. No matter how dickish or where that weirdness comes at me, I try not to change my tune. So I think if everyone kind of did that, I think there's the saving of the industry that Robert is looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
I think you just need people writing books they would buy. I really don't. I think anything needs to be done other than people writing books they would buy, drawing books they would buy, making books they would want to buy, telling stories they have to tell because they don't tell them they're going to go fucking insane, whether it be a zombie story or superhero story or what have you,
Sure.
And then getting them out there and in whatever form, digital or print, that they think best suits them and their muses, and stump that beat. And if everyone did that honestly, I think that's the industry he's looking for, and not this other utopian thing that can't possibly sustain itself.
All right, there you go. Again, Breian Bendis and Robert Kirkman discussing an interesting topic. God, over 10 years ago, nearly 11 years ago now. And it's interesting to see, again, where we've come from after that initial debate that did ring really around comics that year of 2008. So it's funny to see 11 years later where we are now. But I hope you enjoyed it. I love doing these kind of, when these opportunities come up, to look back and see what people were thinking at the moment, and to see where we've come from since then. And think of all the different creator-owned projects that have come since then. And again, people that have gone directly to Image or some of the other publishers with their ideas and done their own thing in a very different way than, trying to make their way through DC and Marvel. Lots has changed. Lots will continue to change. I mean, again, these were the issues of 2008. Think of the issues that creators are dealing with now in 2019 and beyond. Interesting times. I hope you enjoyed today's Word Balloon. Again, no other sponsors. Just wanted to put that out there for food for thought. I hope you enjoyed it. And more great Word Balloon coming up for the month of June. This is Heroes Weekend, so everybody's out enjoying themselves. And I've got a bunch of tentatively planned interviews in the days ahead, but wanted to give you something else to munch on until the next new interview. Until then, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.